Please remember, nothing in this video should be taken as financial advice. Bankruptcy is a legal proceeding in which you put your money in your pant pocket and give your coat to your creditors.
So a couple of things. I worked with Elizabeth Warren on Dodd-Frank. I was head of technology at the CFPB for a while. So I had a couple of years experience of financial services regulation in DC and what that's about. And we didn't have much money at the beginning, at least. And then the Durban Amendment came along, and then all of a sudden there was a lot of money. Folks like Target and Walmart were very interested in the passage. The lesson learned there is that if you come to Washington with a suitcase full of money, there are lots and lots of people there to help you spend it, and it won't stop. They're happy to continue to spend it as long as you bring it. I'm not cynical enough yet to believe that that's all there is to it. I do think that substance makes a difference, and I don't think that there's much substance in crypto's arguments. But they do have plenty of suitcases full of cash that they're using to pay lobbyists, make political contributions. So I think that's the primary driver behind the politics of crypto.
Tim Duncan was working with Elizabeth Warren's office to figure out the regulations for Dodd-Frank and the internet, and he was an expert in the field of technology. He said that their office first started out with $50 million in cash, and over time, there were more and more cash flooding in. There's briefcases of cash flooding in.
Much money, at the beginning at least, and then the Durban Amendment came along, and then all of a sudden, there was a lot of money. Suitcases full of cash.
What he said was that his office started out with $50 million to handle Dodd-Frank, but as soon as the Durbin Act was introduced, this is where lobbyist groups started bringing briefcases of cash to the office. And that's because the big banks would take a substantial hit. You see, the Durbin Act significantly lowered the interchange fees that large banks could charge merchants for debit card transactions. Before the amendment, these fees were a substantial source of revenue for the banks. The cap on these fees resulted in a notable decrease in income from debit card transactions for these fees.
They do have plenty of suitcases full of cash that they're
People reach out to me all the time and tell me they're in the banking industry or they have some inside knowledge. So take this with a grain of salt. But one person told me that at one point in time, we're going to see regulations for cross-border payments that involves a fixed rate, meaning that if you're a bank, you're going to have to tell your customer exactly how much it costs to move money from A to B. Right now, with SWIFT, that's impossible to do because it takes 5 days to settle, and the Forex markets are constantly moving for 4 to 5 days. Before we continue the show, I'd like to take a moment to thank Incogni. Incogni is a service that reaches out to data brokerages on your behalf. Data brokerages are large companies that store information about everyone. They take this information and sell to advertisers, governments, to anyone that is willing to pay. In some cases, even malicious actors like hackers. Even if they don't sell to malicious actors, many are considered honeypots or targets for hackers because they have so much valuable information. This is why it's important to have your information removed wherever you can. Incogni is automated and has lists of data brokerages that they email and request that your information is removed from their database. Under law, databases are now required to remove information if you request to do so. That means that legally they must comply. Incogni is giving a special discount to anyone that uses the code Darren or goes to incogni.com/Darren. 60% off the annual plan just by using the link incogni.com/Darren. Data brokerages cover a lot of information. Sometimes this can be very sensitive information like your mother's maiden name, your last 4 digits of your social, past residencies. And this opens you up for a lot of different attacks. So be careful out there. Remember to use my link incogni.com/Darren.
Warren, Senator Elizabeth Warren, And her office coordinated testimony with the Security and Exchange Commission ahead of a Senate hearing. The Heritage Foundation Oversight Project, of which I'm associated, through a FOIA request, obtained emails from Warren's office to the office of Chairman Gary Gensler 2 days before his Senate testimony back in September of 2021. The email from Warren's economic policy advisor includes a list of questions. Get this, a list of questions that Senator Warren planned to ask, along with suggested answers for the chairman of the SEC. The advisor also wrote, quote, "Let me know if you're okay with the questions as currently written." 2 days later, she sent a follow-up, quote, "Let me know if it's looking like the chair has any issue with the framing of the questions. Definitely don't want to put him in a tough spot," end quote.
Elizabeth Warren, Gary Gensler, these are people that have spent their whole life in politics, and they're essentially taking their salaries from taxpayers. Now, they happen to have hundreds of millions of dollars, but they lived their entire life just collecting money from taxpayers. Now, their salaries are usually pretty small, but they have hundreds of millions of dollars. Well, anyway, Elizabeth Warren and Gary Gensler have been working together for a very long time, and I assume when you're working in an industry like this for a very long time, you're going to have favors that you owe. You heard the initial speaker talk about briefcases of cash that would come into the office, and they would have to shape the laws in the favor of whatever lobbyist group is looking for. Now, right now, Elizabeth Warren and Gary Gensler are running a crusade against crypto, but Gary Gensler recently approved spot Bitcoin ETFs. The spot Bitcoin ETFs allow the big banks to get a piece of the action of the crypto world.
Really? It's just an accounting ledger, a clever.
It's a ledger that everyone has, and can't be double counted. It's almost immutable. That's why people think it has inherent value.
So you trust it more than an Oracle database, or you trust it more
trust
than
it more than a lot of the Bitcoin bulls say they trust it a lot more than the central bank that enables the fiscal authorities to spend money to the tune of $33 trillion.
That's everybody's investment choice. But
and then I think about how many things can be used in a deleterious way. Of course, but that doesn't.
Around the world, debts and deficits are hitting their all-time high. At the same time, interest rates are also hitting their all-time high, meaning that the debt that we already owe is costing more and more to pay. And this has a snowball effect. At the same time, this is when the US SEC passes Bitcoin ETFs, allowing a floodgate of capital to enter the crypto space. Now, who benefits from this the most? Well, the big banks benefit the most from this because the big banks have access to the US equity markets.
Get its nose under the tent with Bitcoin ETFs, what you're going to find is that whatever is there in terms of Bitcoin value, and it will essentially be taken over by traditional finance companies and the same old intermediaries who, if you look at it, they don't really need blockchain. Blockchain is just a ledger, and there's things like DTCC to handle that. There's still blockchain does nothing in terms of market making, function, and trading and sales. You still need that, and that's what these companies provide. In the long run, I don't think they really need to use blockchain. It's inefficient, it's bad publicity, and everything else. So it's going to be interesting what happens in terms of the evolution of Bitcoin in particular.
Yeah,
I love how he downplays the value of crypto, the value of blockchain technology, but says that if there is value, it's going to be overtaken by the big banks. And that's exactly the same argument that Gary Gensler uses.
People to spend by giving them digital currencies on their phones, which I thought was a useful idea. The usual problem for macroeconomists and macro management of economies, when you're in a recession, you want people to spend. and you cannot force them to spend. You can lower interest rates, but they can still refuse to spend. So what you can do, you can give them digital currency, like $100 on their account, with an expiry date. So you have to spend the money by the end of March. And it sounds kind of very useful because, in a sense, yes, a lot of people would go out and spend the money, otherwise they will lose it. But apparently, this has not worked in China. You could argue that China now has a deflation, so prices are decreasing, not increasing. And you would think there's almost a perfect macro case for using digital currencies to support consumption, but for some various reason it has not happened. So I just leave a question mark that we have to work more about the connection between digital currencies and macro management.
Central banks are forced to push more and more stimulus into the economy every time there's a downturn in the market. The central banks have to do more in order to get the economy moving again. This means lowering interest rates more, printing more money. And the more that they do, the less effective it becomes next time. This means that there's going to be negative interest rates. They're going to have to do things like the previous World Bank economists described, where there's expiration dates on the currency itself. And this is what's so funny about crypto in general, is that it came at the perfect time. The perfect timing of when this system was falling and a new innovation comes along that allows them to push it one step further.
And quickly, the third eye on inequality. Who benefited from Bitcoin? Did Bitcoin make rich people richer and poor people poor? I think that's pretty much the statement that we can make, and we would probably all agree. So the question is there what is it that we can do to make sure that all the new technologies are actually not?
I want to go interview Satoshi Nakamoto. And we're like, what? He said, yeah, I want to go interview this guy. And at the time, we're like, hey, it's a figment of somebody's imagination. Maybe it's true. Maybe it's not true. So, we had all this pushback from our headquarters. And we thought, hey, if an agent wants to go talk to him and we have some money, why don't we send him? Let's find out how this works. So as it came to be, the agents flew out to California and they realized that he wasn't alone in creating this. There were 3 other people. And they sat down and met with them and talked to them to find out how this actually works and what their reason for it was.
The crypto bubble has pushed digital currencies into the spotlights, from celebrity shilling dog coins to 90% of central banks exploring CBDC. When the SEC commissioners passed Bitcoin ETFs, it allowed a floodgate of money to enter the crypto space. It allowed the AOK for banks to get involved with the technology. You see, decentralized protocols are necessary to bridge the gap between CBDCs. When CBDCs roll out, negative interest rates, expiration dates, efficiencies in the financial system that we have never seen will start to roll out. The people who are filing for bankruptcy in increasing numbers every year, it's not the poorest, it's not the people at the economic fringes, it's the people who worked hard and played by the rules. Hey everyone, I hope you enjoyed the show. Please take a moment to like and subscribe. If you enjoy content like this, please consider joining my Patreon or my ghost site, dmjr.ghost.io. Thanks guys.